Welcome everyone to the second Fresh Talks, this time focused on farmer first technologies and how it can help accelerate our transition to a regenerative food system. This is an event organized by Fresh Venture Studio in collaboration with Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food podcast. Also the co-host of today, Koen is the host of this podcast. My name is Bart van der Zande. I'm the co-founder of Fresh Venture Studio, and with Fresh, for those who don't know us yet, we are on a mission to accelerate the transition to a regenerative food system by building multiple new steward-owned ventures from scratch. And we organize a yearly 4-month program inviting talented entrepreneurial people and experts to find a co-founder, get a systemic understanding of a problem, and do the early stages of venture building, and we connect them to potential financiers and experts in the field. We're currently actively looking also for applicants, but also always diving into what are the actual questions we need to focus on, what are the problems that we should focus on, what are the technologies that might be interesting, and as part of that, we organize events like this. Before we get into it, I would actually want you also to share a little bit with us. And also as part of the practicalities, you have the chat downstairs in the Zoom, and I would like you to open it up right now and share with us who you are briefly, and also if you would start a venture tomorrow and you would have the capital and the free time, what would it be? Do you have an idea that you think this is what we actually need right now if we want to transition to a regenerative food system? Please share it in the chat. I'll stop my sharing as well, then you actually see my face. Welcome everyone. So please use the chat to introduce yourself. Also during this event, if you have a question for our speakers or just a general remark or you want to chip into the conversation, please use the chat as well to share your question, and then we will give you the stage to ask that question or say what you want to say. Also, to get a sense of the people around you and not just listen to me and the other speakers, we are going to start with a short breakout, which means that you will leave this room and you will be put together with one other person. And we want you to share, well, 2 things: who you are and what the mission is you are personally working on. Quickly get introduced to each other, see some different faces, and get that activity going. So if we are all ready to go, then I would like to ask Huub to start going into breakout room. So see you in 2 minutes. I hope you managed to get a short introduction and managed to meet someone in this room. Now you met one person. We also want to give you a sense of what kind of people are in this meeting. So we'll now do a very short poll. And then if you can answer that, we get a bit of an understanding of what type of people we have here. So please answer the poll.
There's no NGOs there, Bart.
Oh, NGOs. You're right. You're right.
Well, I'm entrepreneurial, so I say entrepreneurial.
That's great. That's great. Thank you, Jan-Maarten. Great to have you as well. I have a burning question to ask you, but we'll get to that during the Q&A. This is also our way to skew the data, Jan-Maarten, not having NGOs and pushing everyone towards entrepreneurial. So the entrepreneurial background is dominant right now, but also quite a few have not founded before and are looking to found. On the technical, we're a little bit in the middle. So we don't have a modern day Nikola Tesla. I was expecting at least one modern day Nikola Tesla today, but we don't have any. But thank you everyone. This gives a clear idea of who we are. All right, I would like to move forward and introduce my co-host of today, Koen van Seijen. Hi, Koen.
Good afternoon, good morning, depending where you are.
Good morning.
So great to be back.
Yeah, Koen is I will briefly introduce you, Koen, and then you can go ahead. But Koen is a the host of the podcast, Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food. He has done a lot of interviews with the pioneers in the field and has probably one of the most extensive networks and I think a good idea of what is happening in the space. And recently he started up a series in specifically focusing on the role of technology. Koen, how are you feeling?
I'm good. I'm always. I had a lot of technology-focused discussions in the last days, so I'm excited. But yeah, also it's a very interesting topic, ranging from clean meat or lab meat to vertical farms to satellite remote sensing. It's definitely heating up, which is great.
Yeah, maybe you can kick it off a little bit, Koen, also with sharing your insights as you've been obviously having all those conversations. What do you see happening, and also what do you see that's missing, and maybe also what is being too much of a hype or overestimated a little bit? I think that's an interesting insight as well.
Yeah, sure. So we've definitely, with the podcast, I think we're at episode 120 something at the moment. So we've had our share of people that are using technologies, and we definitely always discuss it, but obviously we always have a soil focus as well. So it's often about farming, it's often about nutrient density, etc. But we decided to do a specific series on what technologies are needed to get regenerative agriculture to a landscape scale, because we really felt that's missing. We often talk about this farm and that farm, and very rarely, unless you are working at Weiland or at Common Land or some of the very few organizations that are doing groundwork on a landscape or ecosystem scale, you not very often talk about what is needed to get there, what is needed to do 100,000 hectares or 1,000,000 hectares, etc., etc. And so we decided to do a series on that. We got some support from the Grantham Foundation, or the Grantham Foundation for Eclectic Climate Opportunities, and they introduced us to Regrow. So we have a beautiful bridge to Manal in a second. But what we really want to explore in that series, and we're definitely still looking for insights. It's an ongoing series that will be 10 episodes, potentially more. Like, what technologies are already being used, or what is already ready. I don't have a technology background. I would probably not say I can change the light bulb. I'd probably do a bit more, but I'm definitely not a PhD in computer science. So I am very interested in remote sensing, and we discussed it with Regrow, with Anastasia, one of the co-founders, in that interview. Like, what's possible from space? What can you follow from afar? And why suddenly I see a lot of remote sensing companies coming up? How can we follow whole landscapes as they potentially transition to more regenerative practices, and what's completely missing? So we do interviews also on the ground with, for instance, Common Land, who we just interviewed on how do you calculate returns at a landscape scale, and which to me, a return framework is also a technology. We use a very wide definition of technology. And I think what's very interesting is that we're in a moment where ag tech is raising more money than we could have ever dreamed of. Like, the amount of money flowing into the space is honestly quite crazy. But if you dig a bit deeper and ask that question, I think that's what's missing. Like, what of those technologies is actually helping farmers, land stewards, landowners, whoever is managing the land, to make different decisions? Very few of that is. So it's very much focused on not necessarily transition large acres or large pieces of land into regenerative and more regenerative practices. So I would always urge investors, I would always urge anybody wanting to work in this space, ask that question: is it helping to rebuild soil at scale or not? And I think what's definitely, I wouldn't say overhyped, but a lot of things are focused on technologies that in the grand scheme of things might not have the largest impact. I had a lot of discussions on vertical farming the last few days. I don't know why it sort of came up. But if you look at the calories we get out of the produce that can be grown in there at the moment, I'm not saying it cannot scale, I'm not saying we cannot do other things in it, but it's mostly herbs, mostly salads, mostly some tomatoes, etc. It's a very small acreage. I think in the US it's a couple % of the agriculture land. We can ask Manal, because for sure they did research on that. So if we want to have a large impact on chemicals, on water use, we need to look at large broadacre crops, and we need to figure out what to do with rice, what to do with grain, what to do with soy, etc. So I'm very interested what's already possible. I got some very interesting no teaser, but we got some interesting new episodes coming up. of things of, okay, how do we bring this to a landscape scale? Because I think we're ready, we're there, we have amazing examples of individual farms. And now the question is, okay, what are we going to plant, where and why, and how can technology help with that? And how can we predict things? How can we figure out where to plant the trees? And I think there's so much we can learn from that space, but most of it is directed at things that at the end of the day don't help farmers to make transitions. So I think that's an underlying, I would always push on, okay, is there, I mean, Robin O'Brien of Replant Capital, quite a large investor in the space in the US, always asks the question, is there a farmer on your board or in your team? And if not, then I would be worried. So I think that's for all of us who didn't grow up on a farm and don't have that life experience, definitely get close to it, because otherwise you end up building things that are just not so relevant in the space. So I think that's a short overview. The series is only 2 episodes in, so we have a whole thing to discover. We'll be doing webinars around it. We'll do quite a bit. So we're really at the beginning there, but of course we had discussions on technologies. Also, I see Stephanie Reyes in the audience. We had discussions in the past on technology, and I'm always fascinated about it. We're using it now to do this this conference or this webinar, which wouldn't have been possible a couple of years ago.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I would like you to introduce Manal as well, but maybe a question, and we can dive into that into the Q&A, because you're referencing, I think, to what extent the ag tech is actually helping farmers. I also would like to dive into sort of coming from the other side, maybe technological phobia from very nature-based perspective, and how can we integrate that a little bit, and what your vision is on that. So maybe we can get into that during the Q&A, because I think it's good also to get more people involved. Maybe you can give an introduction to Manal as well.
Absolutely, I'm very happy Manal is here. I had the great pleasure to interact with Regrow in the past, after warm introductions from Eric Smith of the Grantham Foundation, who said you absolutely have to talk to them. And then I do that. So I was amazed of what's possible from space, from a distance, remote sensing, and what is not possible yet, but was what we're very close in. And Manal has an amazing experience, more than 12 years in the space, knows everything about remote sensing. And so I think we're very lucky to have her here. It's very early, so I'm also very happy she got up in California to be with us today. So very warm welcome, Manal, and please introduce to whoever doesn't know Regrow. Of course, introduce yourself, but also Regrow and your fascination for tech in the regeneration space.
Good morning, everyone. I don't know everything about remote sensing. Let's start there at all. I didn't spend a PhD trying to figure it out, but I can't claim that I know everything about it. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Koen and Bart, for all of your efforts and for building a community, and for always asking the right questions and trying to stir the conversation and make everyone think. I've really enjoyed the first Fresh Talk and super excited to be joining you on the second one. So as you mentioned, I'm based in California. It's almost 8 o'clock, so it's not too early. My name is Manal. I am an agronomist with a PhD in remote sensing and precision ag. I am the boots on the ground. It's so cool what you said, Koen, and I totally relate to when you're trying to build a company and build a product that speaks to farmers and in theory wants to make things easy. It's just so important to make sure that you have real farmers on your team, and I'm privileged and really honored to have our agronomy having real farmers, people that have to skip work for 2 days because they have to plant their cover crop, which is pretty cool, because that's the kind of feedback and that's how you test that what you're doing actually makes an impact. So I'm the global head of BD at Regrow. Regrow is a platform. Our platform is on a mission to quantify and scale regenerative agriculture. We work with the global agri-food companies, and we're really keen and work towards enabling farmers and companies and food processors and CPGs to become climate healers. So adopting and promoting regenerative ag is something that is feasible and doable for them. Perhaps I'll start where you left, Koen, about the technology piece, about how it's important. Regenerative agriculture is this squishy status of people. Am I in regenerative agriculture? Am I qualified to be considered that? It's a little bit tricky, especially when it's hard to define success for you to be like, okay, I check mark this, I did this for that purpose. So that's always where the discussion with farmers start. And I work on a daily basis with growers and with co-ops, which are the closest people to the farm that are thinking about how we can get that grower to see what can regenerative agriculture do for them. And the conversation always starts like, why do you want to adopt that practice? What is your goal? Are you trying to solve an erosion issue in your soil? Are you trying to enhance your soil health? Are you trying to counter for water lodging that happens on your field? So it's so important to start with, I'm doing this practice for this purpose, because that's how success can be defined. And that's how you want to increase the adoption by showing that effect, by solving a real problem. And not, oh yeah, it's a hype and someone is paying me to do it. If we do it for the right reasons, it's going to be, it's going to exist longer, and the trend is going to increase. So with that being said, around Regen Ag, the technology part is quite fascinating. And I split the technology into two sectors, like what's happening on your farm. There's all the technology of the planters, of the seeders, of the machinery that's on your farm that are able to, perform strip till, that are able to do seed placements between your corn rows for cover crop. That's a fascinating piece of the technology. And growers and farmers, they have invested, for not themselves maybe, but their co-op have that machine that is available for them to use or to rent. So that's kind of the technology that's on the ground. There's the machinery, there's the technology around the seeding, around the different genetics of seeds that works really well for certain climates. And as I said, growers are connected. They have farm management systems, they store that data, they have it saved. And on the other side, there's that technology that really plays a big role in regen agriculture, which is imagery. Which is the capability to record an action that did not happen. For example, if you did not till, if you went through your soybean rotation and corn and beans and you did not do tillage, then that is a practice that could be detected by the remote sensing, by the imagery. And we're talking about publicly available satellite imagery, the Sentinels, the Landsat, MODIS, different resolutions. So having the technology that can detect those fields and monitor them over the time period of your growing cycle, we're able to see through the imagery and say, okay, harvest has happened, and then calculate how much residue was left. And by that, we're able to say, okay, this farmer did actually the no-till practice. So it's a technological capability where a model called OPTIS, Operational Tillage Information System. This is the model that actually analyzed this time series of satellite imagery to produce this kind of information. Was there a cover crop? Was there the absence of a tillage practice? So that's where like the technology could also assist in making it easier for a grower to document what they did, to verify their practices, and to understand their management as well. Another key component that I think is so important when I think about technology is the fact that it's all connected. And what does that mean? And that's something at Regrow that we're really, really passionate about. And it's something that we've highlighted, when we're talking regen, or even when we're just talking about agronomy throughout the year, when we're trying to monitor your fields or provide a nitrogen recommendation, is that information that is in your equipment, are we able, and this is a piece that we're able to solve with our platform, is you're able to connect to that farm management system. So let's say, on your John Deere equipment, you did a practice, you did the planting, you did it document those activities as events. Having the technology where you can log in, bring in that data, and start at a point where like, okay, I can start at a point where I'm showing all my practices for the past 5 years. So I'm I can understand. That's where Regrow comes and helps. Now we can tell you what's your baseline, where you are today. And that's what our technology, by leveraging models like the DNDC, for example, denitrification decarbonization model. It's a model that is able to quantify. So quantify what is your carbon stock and what can happen in the future. So it runs scenario planning tool. It shows this grower, if you decide to adopt this this practice, which could be like a cover crop practice or a no-till practice, this is the potential that you can sequester carbon in your field. It's all connected. You do the practice, and it's even historical practices. They're all on your farm management system. You connect that, you fill in the information automatically. There's no, you don't have to do that. You just connect via API your farm, and you populate that information. And then you're able to understand, okay, where am I today? Because the model does take into consideration your field, your climate, your soil, everything about your own field, to be able to assist you by giving you scenarios of what can happen when you adopt this regenerative practice on your soil health, on your sequestration, and on the how you can capture on that potential new revenue.
And what do you see missing the most? Like, what would you absolutely love if tomorrow morning suddenly with some kind of magic existed?
What I would love to see the most is not on the technology side. I'd love the market to mature faster. I'd like to I'd like more support for growers. I deal with growers on daily basis. I work with them, and they have a lot of questions. Like there is no one solution fit all. What I would like to see is more localized enablement. When a grower wants to adopt a practice, he has a goal. He knows that this works for his soil type, and he understands that this is better for him, because they all want to build resilience. They all want to be able to give their kids a chance for inheriting their farm and making a business from it. So our incentives are all aligned. It's just a matter of being resourceful, of what would work for him. How can the local infrastructure enable him to make that decision and answer all his questions and be confident in, like, this makes sense and this does solve my problem. So it's the conversation at the farmer level. I'd like to see that more maturing and him being more enabled and knowledgeable. And on the technology side and the market side, I'd like to see more maturity of initiatives that, not just announcements of, yeah, we want to do this, we want to do that, but more plans of how we're going to walk with our growers to get to that, to a position where it makes sense what they're doing, they're being rewarded, and all of that. So that's what I would like to see soon.
Great. And anything very briefly, I know we have to transition, but what's overhyped the most? What do you feel, having been in this space for a bit and working with growers constantly? Do you get annoyed by some TechCrunch messages? Do you get annoyed by some announcements? What is hyped too much, do you feel, in the tech space?
Many. That's a conversation by itself. What's
you have
hyped.
To pick one?
If I have to pick one, the commitments, that get announced without an action plan. Like, great, we wanna get 100,000 acre adopting a practice that makes sense. Great, I love these conversations. How? That has been the driver of for us at Regrow to build what we can build, which is the scale. So yeah, we try to solve the most annoying questions, which is, how do I get that? And that's what our purpose is, to bring scale to regenerative ag and for the adoption.
Great, thank you so much. I think Bart is going to step in now with
we'll dive. It's time, which is too bad, because I think we can dive into this for the whole session actually, but we'll do that also. And thank you everyone for sharing the questions already, and keep them coming. We'll get back to that right after we've introduced Wouter as well. Hello Wouter. This is Wouter Zwagemakers. He's I think originally an engineer, he became more of a venture builder actually, and a business developer throughout his career, and he's now active for the Seaweed Company, and they're focusing on, well, valorizing all the possibilities with seaweed, regenerating both the oceans, but also using that to help regenerate the soil, which is an interesting connection, I think, between the ocean and land. I won't share any more on the Seaweed Company. I'm quite enthusiastic also about what you do, but I would like to give you the stage, Wouter, and share a little bit more about yourself and what you guys do as well.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Bart and everyone. Great initiative to be here, and happy to share something on the Seaweed Company and the work we're doing, and actually where many other people can help us with. And as you introduced already, I have some experience, some corporate experience in the past, and but actually feel we're in the moment that we have to valorize more of our natural resources to actually create more wins. Actually, seek solutions where you can create exponential wins. So not per se exponential growth, but wins. And I found out personally into seaweeds, and actually, before me, some other people already found that, and they founded the Seaweed Company, and that's why I want to talk to you about. So I have a couple of slides I want to walk you through, give some background where we're at, and happy to answer any questions that are later on. So I will share my screen, and actually it starts with capturing the value of seaweed, because that's the mission. We believe there's more value into seaweeds than we've seen so far. And actually, if you like seaweeds like us, you understand that there's a huge untapped potential actually in something like seaweeds. Not very much known in this part of the world, this part being Europe or maybe US, but actually it can have a lot of impact. Ocean restoration, it can help coastal communities, it can help health and well-being, but also sustainable farming. And especially the sustainable farming part is something I'd like to share more about today. Because what's the Seaweed Company? The Seaweed Company actually was founded 3 years ago from the belief that some new industries need to arise. And actually, we started with a unique approach looking at a vertical integrated company. So if you look at the moment at the Seaweed Company, after 3 years, we own and operate 4 farms globally: Morocco, India, Ireland, where we create a sustainable, traceable biomass flow. And on the other hand, we turn them into products and make sure we actually generate awareness for the demand of seaweeds. And there's a huge potential for products, but we decided we have to choose right. And we have to choose the right ones in order to get the traction and get the market running also. What our belief is, and this is a small background into seaweeds, there are about more than 20,000 species of seaweeds, but you can classify them in 3 big categories: green, red, and brown. And actually, it can be seen as a commodity, and you can extract stuff from it, and it's a commodity. But the combination of it is where huge value and potential is in. And this is what we believe. A concept that we recently joined, and where we believe we can create the awareness for seaweeds, is something unique that we as a vertical integrated company can actually bring to market. And we call that our blue farming approach. The interesting thing about using seaweeds and utilizing them and utilizing the bioactive ingredients into the seaweeds is that you can create great products that do great things, that generate exponential wins. And in this sense, we can combine the creation of products like a biostimulant, our top health plants product that the farmer can use for their lands, help them reduce fertilizer, make sure the water holding capacity of the fields increase, and increases the biotic and abiotic stresses of the plants with a natural product that actually in a previous life has also regenerated the oceans and created jobs. So it's actually almost our blue farming approach. We try to position it also as a exponential win. Help a farmer make a step on the sustainable farming ladder, and on the other hand, restore oceans. And we have a range of products. I just explained about the biostimulant, but we also have some animal feed products. For example, for chicken. Chicken can be co-fed with some natural seaweed supplements. And actually those seaweed supplements prove to yield better health for the chicken, have less meat rejection for the farmer, and the farmer needs to use less antibiotics. So the same thing you actually see happening to the soil for the biostimulant, we can make sure we can see happening with animals and increasing the wellness of animals. And as such, we believe with seeing this potential, and the first traction we see with the farmers we work with is that we have to set ambitions also on this area. So we believe, for example, in Europe, in the next years, we can make sure 500,000 to 1 million farmers actually understand the power of seaweeds and how they can use them to make a step on the regenerative ladder and become more sustainable. We can improve animal health and life, we can regenerate lands, and at the same time, we mitigate climate impact, recreate jobs, and actually strengthen coastal ecosystems. So this is an interesting story about seaweeds that bridges, I think Koen mentioned it, landscapes and seascapes. So it's a real bridge story, and we're really proud that we work with a couple of farmers. We work with a couple of big companies that actually want to embrace the benefits of this. Interesting, and this is maybe another view on our company, is where does then technology come into play into the seaweed space at the moment? And to make it actually easy, I would like to mention 3 areas. And the 3 areas, I have a couple of examples to give you a sense where is the technology level at the Seaweed Company, for example, or the seaweed industry as a whole. And tech comes into play, and this is pretty logically mainly marine biology, understanding how seaweeds grow. For example, we see here Dr. Stefan Kraan, one of the founders of the company in the R&D lab in Ireland, understanding how the life cycle of Astragalopsis grows and how we can make sure that we can do next year harvest even better than this year. This is marine biology. Another part, tech and engineering. I mean, growing seaweeds, harvesting seaweeds requires quite a bit of tech. It might seem like relatively low tech, but it hasn't been done before. So for example, on the left-hand side, we're into a United project where we actually grow seaweeds 14 kilometers out of the coast in Scheveningen in the Netherlands, something which is a pioneering project. Never has been done before. Growing seaweeds in an ocean with 15, 20 meter waves high, this is stuff we're pioneering. We're also pioneering in solutions like how do you kind of automate, improve the efficiency of the seeding and the harvesting. And the last part of tech, and maybe in this sense, tech is not really high tech, but it's I think like Koen described, it's a yeah, you can look at it broadly, is a biotech. And this understanding of the bioactive components of the true value that are in products. So over here, you see, for example, the biostimulant. How do we make sure that we use, for example, the right seaweed extract with some additions and some other seaweeds that can actually bring those exponential benefits you would like to see? Also, the natural feed supplements, for example, for our poultry. We have the experience and the expertise with our science team to make sure that we kind of make the blends that actually do not only bring the health and well-being benefits, but also make sure we can increase food conversion ratios by which the business case can also work for the farmers. And this is also a very important part of the tech. It might not be really hardcore tech, but it's really science tech. And as such, I hope you have a bit of a glance of what we're doing at the Seaweed Company. And I'd like to close off with something what we all can do. Let's be an ambassador for something like seaweeds. Let's be a consumer to make sure the demand is picking up. Or let's be a farmer that actually embraces the fact that biostimulants based on natural products can help you make a step into sustainable agriculture. So I hope you get a sense of seaweeds, the Seaweed Company, and the work we're doing. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Wouter. If you can, thank you very much. I think very interesting, and we got some questions in the chat as well. And now we're going to open up the stage for multiple questions, and also getting back to some of the questions that were asked to Manal, and some of the questions that people had for you, Wouter, and I have a few as well. So for everyone, if you want to jump in, please feel free. But someone that I want to introduce first and also give the stage for a question is Jan Maarten Dros. He's working for Weiland, but maybe Jan Maarten, you can introduce yourself. You had a question for Manal, and I also have some questions with you, but maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit and then ask your question you had for Manal. And then we'll get back to the questions for you about it as well. You're muted, Jan Maarten.
I did turn on my video though. Thanks, Bart. Thanks, Koen. Thanks, Manal, for your explanation on Regrow. You mentioned DNDC as one of the tech options out there that can help farmers in their journey towards regeneration. I'm involved in a pilot project together with the Dutch agri-lender Rabobank, looking at carbon farming, or actually stimulating regenerative agriculture through carbon payments, as we now agreed to frame it. The partnership is not yet public, but we are working behind the scenes to do baselines and to find models that are appropriate, that are sensitive to regenerative technologies, which is not easy to find. And DNDC was on our shortlist, but we actually decided to pull that plug because it requires very detailed spatial and temporal data in order to come up with modeling results. So my question is, do you have examples of working with DNDC in a farmer-friendly way? And if not, or if so, are there any other options out there that provide a reliable estimation of emission reductions that can be done based on existing data or simple queries?
Sorry for the background noises. My kids all woke up, so a disclaimer. Thank you for your question, John, and for exploring working with models similar to the DNDC. When it comes to modeling, it's this catch-22. Like, you want a model that requires all these input, so you understand the right environmental, the social, the weather, the soil, the environment, what kind of microbes you have. So you do need all these inputs so you can understand what is the environment and how favorable it is to sequester, under what condition, under what practices. So it's good that the model require input. At the same time, it's painful that the model requires input. And I think that's the problem that we're solving, is where is that information? How can we make it from a user perspective super friendly? And I will share with you what our current project with a project developer here in the US. We're working with them and they're using our Regrow platform. So their growers, for example, have a lot of their information about what kind of fertilizer they used, what was their cropping cycle for the past 5 years, when they planted, what did they harvest, what was the amount of yield that they got. All of that information is in their farm management system. So connecting to that farm management system helps us answer automatically all of the questions related to the agronomical practices. Then by connecting to data sources similar to the PRISM, the weather data sources, or the soil type, publicly available data sources that can answer a good chunk of the question of the inputs around the environment, the soil, the weather, and all of that. So the two pieces of information need to exist. It is a model that requires knowing about what has happened, what have been your practices to be able to understand where you are today and how much you can sequester. The best thing or the best approach of it is, where does this data exist? Great, it is on your farm management system. Let's connect to it, let's get it. So we're able to run these simulations with minimum interaction. In addition to the DNDC, we run, for example, Optis, the Operational Tillage Information System, which is using the satellite and the remote sensing to fill out previous gaps in the data around, if a cover crop was available, if a tillage practice has been performed. So along with the combination of those 3 sources of data, you're able to cover what does the DNDC need to run. And I'm happy to share more examples I'll probably drop in a link for resources for all of you guys to go check out, a couple of videos and some workflows that are very farmer friendly. And it's what our farmers are using to enroll on some programs here in the US.
Thank you.
Thank you, Manal. Maybe to follow up with that, and that's partly what I want to ask you as well, Jan-Maarten. It's on, you're talking about combining a lot of data as well and integrating with what is already there, but also introducing new data. And I think, Jan-Maarten, I heard you say in a different podcast also, raising the question, and maybe you can elaborate on it if I'm not saying it correctly, but who is owning the data, and to what extent are farmers owning the data they produce, or where does it land in this, well, developing space also in getting this knowledge? So Jan-Maarten, if you don't want to extend on that, maybe Manal, you can answer already.
No, I can. Yeah, I'm here. No, there's after I did the podcast, I got a lot of feedback from farmers, from tech people, and from everybody in between. For me, tech and agriculture is new-ish. I used to work with Solidaridad, working on sustainable value chains, and it had set up a digital unit. But especially in development space, you work with farming communities that have very little access to data, and even issues like literacy or basic stuff like power and IT devices is already a challenge there. Coming to the Netherlands and working with Weiland, I was surprised about the enormous amounts of data that are collected by the machines that Manal referred to, that are collected using remote sensing through social media, etc. But for all or the majority of these tech companies, and then I mean both IT tech companies and engineering tech companies, it seems that the farmer becomes more and more a business model rather than a client or a partner. I find it staggering to see how little access farmers have to data, regardless of whether it's their own data or it's somebody else's data. There's an NGO, it translates into Boerennatuur, it translates into farmer and data, that has recently been set up in Netherlands to address this issue, because also regulators, the Ministry of Agriculture, for example, are not even aware that the way agricultural companies control and use these data and and limit the access of the data to the farmers themselves is a problem at all. On the other hand, the farmers can do relatively little with a huge heap of terabytes of data. So it requires interfaces, it requires analysis, it requires support. And it's just, I think, another service industry that is developing around the farming community in order to make sense out of this data. But my analysis is that the farmer's interest is not put first in designing the systems that govern these data. The public stakeholders, I think, are failing to provide such a thing. Leave it to the private sector, and the private sector, by definition, is more driven by profit or by their own benefits. And I think this is a serious impediment for regenerative agriculture, because the stuff we do is highly data intensive. We need to monitor things. We have very tailor-made specific interventions in specific locations, so not all farmers are the same. And in order to get to restore values and at the same time reap a profit from a farm, you need really top-notch knowledge and intelligence and technology. So I think open space, farmer-owned and controlled, and privacy-proof systems are required, and there needs to be, well, attention in the public space and with government and civil society stakeholders that this is not something we should leave to the big agri-tech companies. Otherwise, the same thing will happen that happened to GMOs 20 years ago. It was shunned by the public, it was shunned by the NGOs, it was shunned by the governments, it was left to the private sector. And you could argue whether they created the Frankenstein, but they definitely did not create a farmer-first technology with GM.
Maybe Manal, you would like to. I'm very curious what your views are as well in this.
Very good points, Jean-Martin. What I would like to add is, or emphasize and echo what you were saying around these kinds of practices. To see the effect on a soil, it takes time. You do the practice, you start seeing its effect on your soil and being able to quantify it and feel it 10 years, 15 years from now. And you need to take measurements to see how much you are sequestering, how much your soil activity is, or how your baseline is improving. So it is data intensive. And understanding that the purpose of capturing that data is, one, to document and report on your advancement, your success, so you could be rewarded accordingly. And it's also needed for you to understand and find the practices that actually did make an impact on you. So it's answering your question, and it's also answering the questions for the market for you to be able to sell something, which is, for example, your carbon sequestration potential. So the purpose behind the data is to enable you, the grower. It should be owned by the grower. The models are at a point where they could be farm specific. So we're asking you about what you did the past 5 years. How's your own soil, your own amendments, what you've been doing on your farm. And this is all meant for you to make a better choice. That is the perspective of that data, is for you to know what is the best thing for you to, what kind of practices would work best for your soil, what kind of practice will give you the best financial potential. And then the data come in to show that you have done that practice. So the purpose of the data is to assist the grower. And I think there's a huge role, as you mentioned, Jean-Martin, around what does the public sector, rules and regulations around that, but it's definitely something that we are very keen and passionate about, our grower first perspective of this technology, his privacy, his data, and bringing value to him.
Thank you, Manal. I'm speeding up a little bit. I really feel that this is, in a broader sense, maybe a subject we can dive in separately as well, and we can continue to do so after the summer. Koen, maybe there's probably a lot to build there as well. I wanted to ask Wouter one more question before I end it off as well. We had a question for you actually from Andrew Eskaler. Did you already answer it in the chat, Wouter, or not?
I answered one, I believe, but I'm not sure. Let's look at it.
I'll follow up with a question, maybe a little bit more relevant in this context, and maybe we cannot fully answer it, but it's a question also to dive into. As you said, we're pioneering a lot of new things, and we're trying to get technology to help us there. How do you, because it can be a chicken and an egg, right? You need the technology to make it, the business case work. On the other hand, the business case isn't working, so the technology might not have a business case itself. How do you look at driving technological advancements in such a pioneering space as the one you're active in?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think maybe two answers, which pop in my mind now. One is just go and do stuff step by step. On the one hand, just make small steps yourself with the company you can do to get your incremental results, learn from it and see what happens. And the other hand is team up. Actually, the majority of the work actually going into the seaweed field, as I described, for example, that United project in the North Sea, it can only work because you cooperate together with other parties in the space. It's only then that usually these projects get funded with public money or sometimes even private investors. And so you have to team up there. And in that sense, if I look at our company, we try to be a vertically integrated company, but still we do not do everything ourselves. We also need to partner there. And that's the vision we do have. Understand the total chain, but work together on all these areas where you need to work together. And also orchestrate that together well, that the developments can advance where they need to. So on the one hand, just go do it, make incremental steps and learn, and on the other hand, team up together. Really important.
All right, thank you very much. I think this is also an interesting topic to dive into. Someone referred to, and I'm not sure if it's relevant here, but like the big challenges, for example, as has been done with the solar race, where student teams are sort of used to drive a technology that is not yet feasible, that cannot be used yet, but find different ways to sort of moonshot technologies and drive them forward. I thought it was interesting as well, but thank you for your additions. Koen, I think we are, it's always just 1 hour that we're having here, which feels a little bit too short. But Koen, do you have any final remarks or things you wanted to share before I going to thank our speakers?
Yeah, I mean, I think we just literally, pun definitely intended, scratched the surface. I mean, there were some great questions of Hannes for smallholder farmers. I think there's a lot happening there. Anything from processing, do it yourself, or open source systems, all the way up to how to design systems at scale. But also Glenn was asking something on soil health, and also there technology is playing a big role, but also a big role, but obviously, and things are coming in terms of carbon measurement. I'll put it in the link, but also simply observing and helping to observe your land and do simple soil health tests, which give a lot of power back to the farmer. We've done an interview with Abby Rose on that quite a few years ago that have used technology to help farmers to start observing their soils much more with very simple things, like things that everyone can do, even if you had issues with a light bulb, but most farmers don't because they keep their equipment running all the time. So I think that the term of technology in agriculture is just incredibly wide. So yeah, if we go from seaweed to satellites, there's everything is there in between. So naturally, we only scratch the surface. So this begs the question of a lot more of these conversations.
Yeah, all right. Well, thank you. And maybe to continue with that, and we are at the end, but we're trying to host more of these conversations. Obviously, Koen is doing a lot of interviews, zooming into specific questions here. So I always recommend following the podcast. But we're going to host multiple conversations where we only have conversations and a Q&A, I would say, and zoom in on multiple questions. We'll try to do it on a monthly basis. So if you like to continue the conversation with us, please follow us on LinkedIn or find other ways. I will make sure to follow up this meeting as well. and share the stream, so you can watch it back or share it with other people when you want to. For now, I really want to thank Wouter and Manal for sharing their stories, and also Jan Maarten for dropping in from Weiland. So thank you very much. I hope we see you again, and wish you good luck also. I hope you succeed, because then I think we all succeed. So thank you very much for your presence. And Manal, enjoy your day, which is starting. So thank you. For those that want to stick around for a few minutes to ask some questions, maybe to us, feel free, but the speakers will leave us in a bit. And yeah, thanks everyone for being here as well. So always a weird ending digitally, but
You're welcome.
have a great day.
Bye-bye. You too.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. If there are people that want to ask us something, maybe I'm not sure about if you want to stick around, maybe you want to join the conversation, but we usually keep the room open a little bit for those that want to
Yeah, I'm
stick
looking to
around and have
download the chat.
after meeting chat.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's
I have it.
It's part of the stream. It's part of the stream, but
Oh, perfect. Okay. Well, thanks, guys. Enjoy your afternoon and evening.
yeah, thank you. Bye-bye. Koen, how are we going to dive into all these questions? I can now understand why you have always multiple podcast questions that you can dive into. Make a podcast.
And when we did the Ask Me Anything webinar, it's like an hour, and I just try to plow through as many pun intended as possible, and usually we get somewhere there, and never there, because it's just an endless one. So it's every question raises more questions, which is fine to a certain extent.
Sorry? Oh, someone has a question.
I think Glenn raised his hand, if I can see well. Hi, Glenn.
Oh,
Hi guys. Really good to finally meet you. I've been listening to all your podcasts for such a long time and thinking, oh yeah, I've got to reach out one day. Here's my opportunity. We're tackling the project, the problem, the bigger regenerative agricultural problem in a slightly different sort of way. So we're at the Carbon Farm, based in Jersey in the Channel Islands, and we actually farm carbon as a living. That's what we do. So currently we're working on a farm, Jersey hemp, and we're transitioning them into regenerative agriculture. And the way we do that is we produce biologically complete compost, understand what the state of their soil health is and the soil succession is, and then we improve that soil succession to suit what their plants need to grow in. And then we see that their plants increase photosynthesis capability and the transfer of CO2 into soil carbon exponentially, because hemp is a plant of sequestration significance. It can pull down about 30 tons per hectare per year, which is probably 2 to 3 times more than any tree can do. And we can measure this. And what we're doing is we're entering that into the blockchain, and we're issuing carbon credits on behalf of farmers to business offsets and paying farmers to farm carbon. So we're literally walking them through the transition of regenerative farming and measuring it independently for them and entering it into the carbon markets.
Great to finally meet, and I definitely have to dive into it.
Yeah, it's quite a fun
I've heard
thing.
about net hemp, etc., but obviously we have not done anything on fibers, I think, so far. So
yeah, well, we're using hemp predominantly as a bioremediation crop. So
I've heard that it's been used like that.
Yeah, so it's a great way of regenerating soils for trees, and the tree loss is obviously a lot less if you precede it with hemp. And yeah, it's we're finding then when you can actually move the soil succession to suit the plants, so becoming more fungal as you get towards trees, and you balance your microbiome around the roots, then the plants can actually deposit a lot more stable soil carbon into the soils, which can be measured and then, you know, offset.
Amazing. No, I think there's a lot to discover or to figure out, and yeah, how to speed up these processes, how to speed up agroforestry processes, how to bring down the failure rate of trees and all of that, because it's definitely holding back a lot of the agroforestry pledges that we've seen around.
So I put up one of the questions, you know, maybe we ought to start looking more at natural systems rather than technology in one of the chat things. I think technology is definitely something that's going to come along, and it needs to come along desperately. But at the moment, it's actually quite easy to do the measurements without technology. So, for example, soil organic matter, that can be measured. Soil carbon, you can figure out what the soil carbon levels are, and you can see whether they're increasing or falling. The other measurements is, of course, the soil health. So we can do the Elaine Ingham's soil food web analytics and work out what the fungal bacteria ratios are, which relate to the plants.
Can you do it at scale as well? Is it getting costly at a few thousand hectares, or what's your feeling there?
So we've got a young lab tech who actually is at Warwick University, and she's at the moment doing comparisons between Elaine Ingham's counts and a DNA count. So we're actually seeing for the first time what the differences are. A human count comes in at a very reasonable price, the same cost as any chemical analysis. Obviously, a DNA count is going to come at £500, £600, £700 or whatever, ridiculous. So it'll be interesting to see the comparison.
It's not, you don't know yet. Like how
don't know yet.
Okay. That's going to be interesting.
It will be interesting. But just to give you an idea, we're doing soil sampling. We're doing sort of like a package for about £75, which will do a total carbon. That's including the microbial carbon. And that's sort of affordable, but it's still quite expensive for a farmer. But that can be accounted through the carbon offsets anyway.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I see we just recorded an episode. I mean, some people are selling obviously to the front runners like Stripe, etc., who are actively in the market for, let's say, the experimental stuff, the biochar, the enhanced weathering, potentially hemp. I don't know if you're selling to them as well. So there's definitely a moment in time now where you can finance some of this through carbon credits to not crazy amounts, but definitely crazy amounts per ton, and to kickstart a lot of this, and the others will follow is the current thinking. But of course, we don't know if we're in a bubble of carbon credits at the moment, but definitely there's a lot of money out there searching for this.
Yeah, the UK government is doing quite a major deal with this. So I know they put out this thing the other day that if businesses don't submit their ESGs, I think I heard it on one of your podcasts, businesses don't submit their ESGs alongside their tax returns, then they're less likely to get a governmental contract. And that also, I
don't think it was on ours, but that would be very interesting. Yeah, that would be very interesting. Yeah.
So and that follows through to investments that banks make as well. So banks have to submit all of the investments they make and what their environmental strategies are. And again, if they all line up, then the government is going to support them. If they don't, then they won't get the government support, which is now opening up the market so that now we're finding big emitters are now seeking ways of offsetting. So the obvious, the low-hanging fruit are the farmers, of course. We just got to get the measurements in place to do it.
Absolutely, and the standardization and the double counting sometimes. And I mean, but there's a lot moving there. I'm talking to Stripe to get them on the podcast to explore that more, their leading role as one of these buyers.
So the way we do it, just to really, I know I'm taking up a lot of time, which I apologize for, but the way we do it is through the blockchain. So the carbon coming from bottom up, the carbon goes through a methodology which is accepted by the UK Carbon Code. And then that goes off for verification and certification. And then you get a dark green carbon credit or a light green carbon credit. So a light green carbon credit would be a lower value carbon credit, which say accounts for trees. Or if you want a dark green carbon credit, that would actually would go to a local regenerative farmer who's signed up on the regenerative organic certification. So that means he's not using any chemicals, soil health, animal health, and people health at top of the level. And then it's just very simple doing the total carbon audits and the soil food web.
Super interesting. Thanks. Don't worry about taking time. Super interesting stuff. Sorry about.
I think it's great. This is there are no rules here, so anyone can step in. And great that you did. I also wonder, I mean, you say you use the blockchain, right? But it's also it's mainly about the input in the blockchain. So the blockchain makes sure that it's controlled and certified, but you can still input or lie, I would say, with the input you're doing on the amount of carbon that you're actually storing. How does it work for you? You shared a little bit on how you measure it, but what is the control mechanism actually in making sure that the carbon that you say you are sequestering is actually happening?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and this is one of the things that we've been tackling quite hard. And I heard one of the statements came up in the earlier discussions about, the farmer actually being in control of the measurements or understanding the measurements or something. We find that is where your double accounting will really start to cause problems. So the way the carbon farm has positioned itself is to actually work with the farmer as an independent auditor. But we also guide them through the regenerative transition, if you see what I mean. So, what we do is there are 4 tests we really do. We do the biologicals through an independent soil food web lab tech. We do chemistry, looking for the total soil carbon. We do that through an independent recognized laboratory in the UK. We do physical, which the farmer tends to do themselves. So that's water infiltration and the soil parameters. But the 4th one we do, which I think is the key to it, is the practices of the farmer. So, and the way that's done is what is their certification. So if their certification is conventional, i.e. no certification, then they can't even enter onto the scheme. If it's organic, they can enter onto the scheme. But then there are certain parameters like tillage, if they do that, or use of certain chemicals, coppers or sulfates or things like that, then they would obviously, that would knock them off, knock certain points off. But if they're regenerative organic certificated, in other words, soil health, people health, and animal health are key to it, and they obviously have to go through their accreditation to get the regenerative organic. That solves that problem. And then we just measure it through, as I say, those measurements, which I gave, those different parameters, the biological, chemical, and physical data sets.
I think that's also what we just discussed with the satellites, and because that's maybe potentially because you said we don't need that much of technology, and I think it's good to start with what nature is actually doing and try to have technology in a supporting role. But maybe, for example, in seeing what is, if we zoom in on the practices, for example, using satellite data on seeing what has actually been done on a farm, is that something you see as potentially helpful? For example,
yeah, we use satellites. We currently use satellites, but we can only allocate a light green carbon credit through satellite data. So in other words, if the offsetter doesn't want to go for the higher value carbon offsets, where we're talking above 25, 30 pounds a unit, if they only want to spend about £5 a unit or whatever, then we'll use satellite data because it's relatively cheap to do that. The cost is in the measurements, as you've just quite rightly alluded to. So if the client comes to us and say they want light green carbon credits, that's absolutely fine. We can do that. We can send a satellite over and measure it. But that tends to be for carbon credits that are not local. So that's if someone wants to grow trees in South America or something like that. And obviously there's all the, all the problems that could be associated with that, with climate change. Obviously the trees can burn down, or there could be political problems, or all the rest of it. So it attracts a much lower value carbon credit. But for a local carbon credit, a higher value where you get all the added bonuses, food security, biosecurity, water security, then that attracts a much higher carbon credit, carbon unit.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, cool. I I'm not sure if Koen, if you still have time to stick around. Normally we keep it open for about 15 to 30 minutes. I think it's. I would like to continue the conversation a little bit, but also invite maybe the people that are sticking around if they want to say something.
Sure.
Or
I can't stay much longer, but I'm very happy to answer as many questions as I can. Well, I've got this great opportunity you guys have set up.
No, great to have you. I think.
Yeah, I see that Giuseppe, who's in the
yes
as well, would like to connect with you, Glenn.
Hi, good to meet you. Thanks, Koen and Bart for setting this up. And Glenn, very interesting. So I'm responsible at the Live Kindly Collective, which is a collective of plant-based meat alternative companies, produce plant-based meat alternatives. And we're also have an agriculture division where we implement regenerative agriculture and putting in place a system to generate carbon credits. And we recognize all the complexities. But Glenn, it's interesting you mentioned sort of the measurement is not the issue. I just wondered, how do you prove permanence of the carbon credit? That seems an issue that we're also combining these different, remote sensors, local samples, putting that into models and machine learning. But that still proves, it's still a multivariate problem with a lot of variables that interact together. So I just wondered how you deal with that issue. And then related to that, which credit agency is actually you're working with that is actually issuing the carbon credits?
Yeah, really good questions there. Thanks for asking them. So permanence is just a matter of time. If you look at if carbon is a farmer's bank account, soil organic matter is their current account. In other words, it comes in and goes out, but soil carbon is their deposit account. So the longer they can actually keep their soil organic matter levels up and the soil biodiversity is suitable to what the plants requires, then the stable soil carbon will start to accumulate, and you can measure that over a period of time. So that's pretty straightforward. The other side of permanence is what do you do with the biomass, the above ground carbon. If that carbon is sent off for, I don't know, incineration, worst case scenario, then that would go as a negative. But if it's composted or made into hempcrete, which is what we do a lot with our biomass, then obviously that locks it up and that acts as a positive. So that's the way we deal with permanence. As regards to which group we work with, we use the UK Carbon Code. So that one, what that is set up the template for farmers or consultants like us to actually use. We have actually improved the basic carbon code. So we've almost done a fork on the carbon code to create a much more concise, for whatever the context of the farm is, to suit that farm. So depending on what that farm is growing, we can change that carbon code just slightly to basically support the farmer. So at the end of the day, the whole point is the farmer farms the carbon, and initially, if it's difficult for them to cover the costs, the business I work for, the carbon farm, will cover the costs initially until ecosystem services cut in, and then the costs reduce dramatically to the farmer, so that they can then start issuing the carbon credits on their own behalf.
Okay, thank you.
I have a bit of a follow-up question, if you still have time, or at least the thing that I'm struggling with a little bit, and I wonder, all of you, what you think. But it's also when you start measuring, right? So it's about the amount of carbon that you actually harvest. But correct me if I'm wrong. So if you want to, you're already doing a great job. You almost have you did a perfect job for maybe indigenous people having a huge area that is perfectly holding the carbon already. That is not incentivized then by capturing it. Can we sort of define this is the amount of carbon that should be this area should be capable of holding, and you are already having 30%, so that's good, and then you could add up to it. Is it?
Yeah. So I'll tell you how we do it. It's not actually fixed, and we haven't come up with we haven't push this towards the UK Carbon Code, but we've talked to them a bit about it and asked them whether they'd accept it. But it's just a thought. It's just something we're throwing out there, and it's open for discussion. And it's open there to be cut down, basically. But the UK has some really tight figures on this. So back in the 1700s, soil organic matter was around 30%. Atmospheric CO2 was around 240 parts per million. In 2021, soil organic matter was 3%, and atmospheric carbon is 420 parts per million. So it's obviously, soil is a major contributor to the whole climate change issue. So we're using 3% as our baseline. And then we're also looking at the biology. So there's no point in having, say, 5% soil carbon or soil carbon, but actually have no life in the soil, because that indicates that the farmer might have been putting down loads of manure, but also following it up with glyphosate or something like that. So if the soil carbon levels are anything above 3% and there's a really good, healthy soil food web present, then we believe that farmer should be entitled to some, compensation.
And that's something that isn't recognized now, right? So you're lobbying for that.
Yeah. So where we are here in Jersey is we're part of the UK, but we're not. So we have our own government and our own laws, and we have our own money, but we're a protectorate of the UK as well. So we can use the UK's carbon code, and we can develop that code for ourselves. And so that's what we're proposing to do, is to develop that code, to put in this new parameter. And we're seeing whether people will, if businesses will accept it. And if businesses do accept it, and then there's a transaction, then there's no reason why it can't be included into the more universal code.
But I think Bart, it's a key point that you're mentioning, because paradoxically, what this means is that the worst farming practices have the biggest delta between, let's say, the baseline and the additionality, right? So you get like this paradoxical situation where if you're really doing good regenerative agriculture, you can actually make less money today. So that's why we're really focused on also showing the annual sequestration potential, because it's rather than to see it as a pool of SOC that you sequester and then you create one credit that is really a long-term and permanent proven carbon. You also want to look at the short-term carbon cycles and what is it really that you capture every year as a net sequestration, and then you can apply that also to farmers that are already in the regenerative space.
Yeah, and potentially you could even look back, I think, right, with some of the satellite data goes back, I think 16, 17 years. So you can actually see, I mean, that's a long time, not very long, but still, like you could theoretically see, okay, who has been in it for a while and who didn't take out his carbon removal device, AKA the plow. Because that's the danger, obviously. If that delta is too big, or the soil in terms of trees, etc., like we're going to incentivize the wrong behavior.
Yeah. Except for satellite gives you, as Glenn was also mentioning, it gives you a sort of approximation.
Yeah, of course.
Now the new Flex satellite that ESTA is launching next year, or actually, sorry, 2023. That's going to be a big improvement. Because
what's it going to be the resolution?
So
I think centimeters, right?
I think 15 centimeters, something like that. So it's really big improvement. Yeah.
But this same problem comes back. It doesn't matter what technology you use until you can actually get technology into the soil, i.e. a bot in the soil that can measure the microbial as well as the carbon, the organic carbon and non-organic carbon, then you're never going to get an accurate figure. So the way we do it is to actually see how the farmer's soil succession is mimicked by the microbial succession. And that's mirrored. So if your fungal bacteria ratio is, say, 1-to-1 and you're trying to grow row crops, then that shows that there's been good practices by that farmer over a period of time. And what we're finding with the great study in New Zealand on regenerative farms is within one growing season, you can actually increase the soil health or soil carbon levels up to a certain amount, or you can sequester so much carbon. And then following years after that, the percentages drop dramatically, but there is an increase each year, if you see what I mean. So it's that initial, period where you get the serious sequestration, and then it's just like topping up continually, and that's how nature plays the game, because she doesn't want to show she doesn't want to throw the whole succession out of balance to what the crop that you're trying to grow or it's suitable to grow.
So Glenn, and maybe I don't want to take too much time from the others, I see, just because it's very interesting. So, but on the measurement of the fungal bacteria ratio, do you only work with sampling, or also do you work with sensors, soil sensors? And if so, which are sort of proxies for the soil health in terms of bacterial and fungal activity?
There's no sensors out there currently that are as good as the human count, and the human count by no means is up to scratch. There's too many variabilities. So what we tend to do is we just use one person to do all of our soil samples, and she's really, really busy. But at least we get some sort of like, continuation from her. And we're desperate. There is a lot of work at the moment being done. I think there's 3 different groups who are actually trying to develop some sort of machine learning through the microscope. So we're just teaching the machine to actually recognize shapes of microbes, so it can be a much more accurate count than the human count. But we're about 2 or 3 years off that. I've heard of, there's also bots which are being developed in Australia, which are using phosphorescent spectrometry, which is able to, which is quite interesting accuracy. Again, so there's lots going on. It's a really exciting world, but at the moment we're about 2 years off, and we just have to still use the human eye, which isn't the best, but it's the best we've got at the moment.
Okay, thanks.
Right. Potentially we can dive into this in one of the conversations after the summer as well. I think it's an interesting conversation, but I also want to be mindful of all of your time. I think we are nearing the end of the sort of the open space as well. Maybe we can have one more remark from Hannes and then wrap it up. I would say, because Hannes has been asking quite a few questions. So Hannes, if you're still here.
Yeah, hi. I might drop out. My battery is low, but I just had a question about the value of the carbon credits against the value of the crop, the hemp, if sold. Can you elaborate on that relation, and then maybe also asking if you plan on leaving the island, scaling to other geographies, or is that too early?
As far as evaluation is concerned, that's a really good question, and that's what you can actually get for it. So we are currently negotiating for farmers. We reckon we've got to hit about £50 a ton to make it worthwhile for a farmer to farm a ton of carbon per hectare. We're hitting about £35 a ton at the moment, which is interesting, but we've got to get it up to £50, and I reckon we'll do that this year. Because of all the external, the other benefits that come along with it, the water security, food security, and all the other issues, we can sell that, we think. As far as with regards to the hemp, well, actually a healthier soil produces a more healthier crop. And as I've always said, Mother Nature's, or the microbes, work 24/7, 365 days of the year. So I'd rather employ them for free than a load of staff. So the profitability of the hemp crop increases dramatically alongside the amount of carbon in the soil. So actually, you can have your cake and eat it if you farm regeneratively and measure it. What was your other question? Sorry, I forget.
Geography.
Geography. Yeah, it's a really good question. That I'm glad you've asked it. We're completely changing the whole strategy of carbon credits. I can tell you we are now, how can I say it best? We're trying to privatize the environment. So we're using crypto coins, we're using blockchain, and we're going to give everyone an opportunity to potentially purchase a crypto coin, a carbon coin, in order to actually offset their emissions directly to the farmer. And that's quite exciting, because that will really localize the whole carbon trading system. So there will be a lot of need for businesses or to offset their carbon locally, in which case we'll be looking for farms all over the world to actually do that. So it's a really exciting area that's developing. We'll dig deeper on that one day.
Thanks a lot, Hannes, also for your question. Yeah, great that you jumped in. I think Glyn, if I pronounce it right. So good to hear from you as well, and hope you join more of our conversations, because I think it's there's a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a great pleasure meeting you. It really has. I've been meaning to get in touch with you guys for a long time, but I love the podcasts and I love what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
And keep up the good work.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Koen. And yeah, see you next time.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Cheers.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Bye-bye.